This is the Hofstra Radio Alumni Audio Yearbook, Volume 2, and today is January 27th, 2025. Please tell us your name and the years you were at Hofstra Radio.
I am Denyse Haynak, and I was at WRHU from 1990 through 1994.
And I shouldn't have to ask that question, but I do as a matter of form. We were there together, so this is going to feel like an inside conversation to some people, and hopefully we'll make it kind of fun. What positions or titles did you hold at the station?
I was the music director, although maybe 1993. I'm not sure what year I was the music director. And I also was a co-creator of a heavy metal on-air show called Whiplash.
I was hopeful that you'd remember the year that you were music director, because that's one of my memory gaps. I'm like, when was that? And I feel like it might have been our sophomore year,
Okay, so that would have been 90.
91 to 92.
Really?
I feel
Okay.
like, and that's when I was airwave producer.
Okay, yeah, this was
And
probably, yeah, same time.
because we got to go back. I got to go back and preface this a little bit more. So somehow, in the general scheme of things, like I know I arrived there with Mike Verhagen. It was me and Mike, and then Al was part of our crew, and then you and Kathy Wurzberger were like a crew, a tandem sort of, and we were all
Yeah,
started together at the same time. And John Kay Beaker, we
right.
were all there. We kind of went through things at the same time period. Um, and I'm trying to remember. I got to be airwave producer sophomore year, which I didn't expect, but that's a story. And either you or Kathy was music director that sophomore year. And then I feel like it flipped. Like Kathy was music director, and then you were music director, or vice versa. And I can't quite remember. And I wasn't sure if you had any insights or memories of the job. Like, well, let me ask it this way: why did you want to be music director?
I was really interested in the new music that was coming in, and it seemed to me
Hmm.
like that particular job got to listen to every single record and CD that came in the door.
Yeah.
And I also, wanted to work with the different reps from the record labels, and there was a lot of opportunity with that position, and that's why I was interested in that.
So, you mentioned the metal show and Whiplash, and a lot of times people get, the stereotype that is like the only thing that you're into, or a particular kind of metal. But I don't remember that being the case with you. I feel like you were into all kinds of stuff.
Um, I definitely was. I think back at the time I was still kind of into hair metal and Guns N'
Yeah.
Roses, and I do know Appetite for Destruction came out when I was music director. So that was probably 90,
Okay.
91, 92.
Yes, it was 91.
But I that's one of my definite memories as music director is when those albums showed up and everybody was so excited to hear them.
If I can impose one of my stories onto yours, because I was just talking to Jen Murphy about this, that I remember getting a ton of swag from, I guess it
Oh
was
yeah.
Geffen at the time, that we got vinyl and CDs, and I don't know if there were T-shirts, but there were stickers. There's all, like, they sent us way more stuff than the average college radio station would have gotten.
Did we
And I
know
remember some of
somebody at Geffen?
that's part of my question is like, well, it probably would have been that summer of 91, because that's when Nevermind came out, and then like Soundgarden and Blood Sugar Sex Magic and all like this Tribe
Core,
Called
Stone
Quest.
Temple Pilots.
Yeah, like all this stuff came out around the same time. And so I'm wondering, was it just like we were just in the way of this wave and we got a ton of stuff, or were we already cultivating these relationships? And like, because you're already doing Whiplash with
Right.
with with Kathy, like, were you guys already making these connections and finding a way to get that stuff?
I definitely think that was part of it. Like that was part of why it was exciting to be music director is that you were in contact with these record labels and you got to form friendships with people that worked there. And then they were excited to send you the new stuff that was coming out, and you were excited to get the all the great swag and all the get in the door first and get to hear all the new stuff before everybody else.
Right.
But that was definitely something that I remember about the job was being on the phone with them a lot and talking about what was coming out and what we were interested in playing.
Hmm. I have my vinyl copies of Use Your Illusion,
That's
still to this
yes, Use Your
day.
Illusion. That's what it was. Yes.
And that's because I that's part of what I was getting at with with you and Kathy and myself. I remember us listening to that record, and obviously it's like an over bloated double album that
Yeah.
we listened to it a ton. And one of my funniest stories, one of the things that I fondly remember, and I will text you from time to time when I hear the song, is us listening to Get in the Ring by Guns N' Roses.
I remember that too. Oh my goodness, that was amazing. Good
and
times.
and memorizing his rant and just being so petty and just so awful. I got so much enjoyment out of it. And it was so much fun because like I was, it's no secret, I was like Mr. Straight Laced. And
Kidding.
you and Kathy were, a little bit more edgy and a little more in touch with stuff, and I felt like I got permission hanging out with you guys to, like, you know stretch it to some different personas and things. And that was one of those things that I really enjoyed, and I felt like that led to other things, like, oh, let me explore what this is and let me check that out. So not only is it a funny story, to me, it's also an entryway into stuff that I maybe wouldn't have. Yes, Guns N' Roses was huge at the time. Like, who wouldn't have listened to the record?
Right.
But like, I felt like that gave me a gateway to other things. And
And see,
that's, I think that's kind of what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I started out more, into the hair bands, Skid Row or whatever, but especially working as music director and working with Whiplash, like I definitely morphed into much heavier music.
Hmm.
At the time, like Pantera was getting to be a big thing. It maybe wasn't, they were starting to be big around that era. And it was interesting to hear a lot of much heavier bands than I probably ever would have been exposed to otherwise. And one of the fun things too is we got to go see shows. So
Yes.
you'd be in touch with the label and they'd say, "Hey, do you want to come and check out this showcase that this band is doing?"
Hmm.
And that was a fun way to learn about new music. But that definitely altered my musical taste and made me. I was into much heavier stuff by the end of it
Mm.
as a result of that.
Do you remember any other big shows you were going to at that time? I mean, there were a ton. We went to small shows and big shows all the time, but anything stand out as a memory?
We went to so many. I remember going to shows at the Limelight. I don't know if you ever did that, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Limelight was a deconsecrated church, and they used to have metal shows like crazy. And I went
Hmm.
and I saw Fight play there, which was Rob Halford's project. I saw Widowmaker with Dee Snider, and we kind of had the inside track and were able to get backstage. And I got to meet Rob Halford, which was amazing
That's
because
cool.
of our connection through the label. So that was an exciting time for me to be that close to New York City, and just to have somebody walk me into a room and I get to shake hands with Rob Halford was an amazing experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, jumping on the train, the LIRR, and
Yep.
heading downtown and going there. And just, for those who know, I don't know if we should explore this. Like, what was it like at the time? I don't know. We probably don't need to go into those details. If you know, you know. But if you don't, it's worth it's worth doing some research.
New York was not as sanitized back then as it is now. I'm a little surprised that my mother, I don't know that my mother knew what I was doing, but that I would
Yeah.
just jump on the train and go into the city for a show, at CBGB's or somewhere
Right.
at 18, 19 years old. That's looking back, that's crazy, but I used to do it every weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. We were always going in, and sometimes it was major venues, and sometimes it was on the Bowery, or somewhere in the meatpacking district, or
Yep.
something like that. Where today the rents and are astronomical, and everything's very different. But it was but just the clubs were different. There's the opportunities to see music. I feel like it was just all the time, everywhere. And I guess you really get to take advantage of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I went to see a show. I think it was probably also at the Limelight. It was like Love Hate or somebody, and I had ridden in to the city with a friend of mine that was going to one of the colleges near us, Adelphi maybe. And
Uh-huh.
he was in their radio program, so we both kind of had that same in, and we drove into the show, And when we came out, somebody had broken into his car and broken the windows. And this was the middle of winter. And I can remember having to drive all the way back to Long Island with no windows in the car, just freezing. But I mean, yeah, I guess that was
Yeah,
part of the mystique, part of the excitement back then.
I didn't know that story. That's wild. I never heard that one. Yikes. Yeah, it's a good thing your mother didn't know. Make sure she doesn't listen
Oh,
to this.
yeah, don't ever tell my mother what I used to do.
It's best not to know. Best not to discuss these things. Now,
This is
now that's
true.
the wild side. That's the dangerous side. But I feel like there's another part of music director that is profoundly nerdy and sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
like keeping track of all the stuff. Did that appeal to you?
Um, I am at heart a librarian. Like in hindsight,
Hmm.
it's amazing to me that I didn't become a librarian. I love to organize and categorize and classify. So that job just sung to my inner librarian on a really deep level.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, I mean, having you and Brett and a few other people. I mean, Brett's literally a professional archivist. Like that's what he does with his career. Like having people like that, it was a big part of what we did. And I feel in those 3 years or so, so of our sophomore, junior, senior years, we did a ton of reorganizing of the record library.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can remember just even doing that after hours or like as fun. Like we would get together
Yep.
as a group and do it as a fun activity.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of our social time there. As I've said in many interviews, like who wouldn't want to spend, you know, their spring break or their January break or whatever it is, or a Saturday, like in a basement of a school going through 40-year-old records. I mean, that just sounds like the best time for a 20-year-old.
You remember the 78s that we had? We had that whole huge collection of the 78s with all the really old music,
Yeah, yeah,
and that
yeah. I
that
mean,
was fun to explore those.
there were only a couple of people who made use of that. There was a guy named Lloyd Roush
Uh-huh.
who did a swing show, and occasionally I feel like Cantor Don Goldberg, if you remember him, I feel like he
Uh-huh.
would break those out, and occasionally Carl Bucking would. But that was one of those things that I don't think as 19 and 20-year-olds we had any idea what to do with, other than it was like, oh, that's cool, that's there. Where's the Beatles records? I you
Right.
know I don't know that we knew what to do with it now. If those things still exist, I feel like we could waste some time there. That would be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I guarantee
Yeah.
they don't exist anymore, which is sad.
Yeah. I know a lot of stuff got transferred when we moved out of Memorial Hall, but that's 30 years ago. So who knows
Right.
what's happened since. Um, the other part of like the nerdy music director part of it is I have some files that I saved and things that uh, people's applications and things like that about applying for jobs. And throughout several of them, a lot of us were like, we have to have our music library computerized.
Oh,
And
wow.
in 1991, 1992, I think that means something entirely different, obviously, than it does today. But I feel like you might have written something like that, or Kathy and myself and Brett, like we want, and Dave Caney, were like, we have to have a computerized database or some sort of printed catalog of what our records are, so we could find something. Does that ring a bell to you at all?
That does, but I mean, at that point in time, I probably was doing my homework and my assignments on a word processor. I know I did not have a computer of my own.
Yeah.
And I don't have any recollection at that point of anything being in any kind of a database. Like I remember, writing with a Sharpie on a sticker and putting it in the corner of the album, but I don't even know that I would have known what to do with it back then, to tell the truth, considering
Right.
I didn't have my own computer to work with. That was such a new idea back then. Um
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right about the word processor thing, because I had one that I would bring with me to the office, and it would have like 4 lines of text in it.
right.
I don't know, had like I don't even know, some insignificant amount of memory. Like I could write a 12-page paper and like that was it. But I feel
Yeah,
like we
that's exactly
typed
it.
out, you know, all these different records and all the songs, and then we print it out and we started like making a binder of things. And I feel like we understood things were changing, but we
Yes.
were just
Yep.
at that weird thing, like technology's just it was just about to change, but we had no idea where
So the
things were
thing
going.
was, we went through 4 years of all of these classes and actually editing with razor blades and reel to reels and all of this stuff. And I will never forget that right before we graduated, we went on some kind of a field trip into the city. I don't remember what it was for, but they were saying, oh, this is the new wave of everything, and everything is going to be electronic, and all of your editing is going to be, with these computer programs. And I just stood there and I'm like, I just went through 4 years of education and you just told me that I'm obsolete before I'm even hitting the job
Yeah,
market.
yeah.
But one of my first jobs that I did have, I landed a job right out of school with WBAB, and my job was to put their record catalog into a computer. So,
Isn't that
it's
funny?
ironic that that's what I ended up doing, but that just wasn't available to us at the time that we were still in school.
So that probably would have been brand new for them as well, right?
It was. Yeah, that's
For,
that they were just getting it, and that was up to me, discussing, oh, is Meatloaf categorized under M or L, and putting all the different albums in and deciding what we were going to play, and that I did that for probably more than an entire summer. Uh, just getting everything digital.
and would you have a stack of records and you're just typing everything in?
I feel like it was a combination of records and CDs at that point, and I would just take a
Yeah.
huge stack every day and just go through and put it into different categories and put the names of the albums and the artists and everything. So yeah, I was definitely a big part of setting that up for them as the new type of technology was starting to take over.
Wow. And you mentioned CDs. That was the transition period where I feel like when we first started, in that spring of '91, that
Hmm.
most things were coming in on vinyl, and within a
Yeah,
year, it was probably 75% CDs. I feel like it was a real quick change then.
and
Does
it
that
was
seem right?
yes, and it was a learning curve for us too, because being on the air and playing vinyl and just the physicality of it,
Mm,
and being on the air and having a CD and hitting a button were two very different experiences. And I think we were definitely on the cusp of both sides of that. And then not that long after, there wasn't even a CD anymore. It was all run through a computer program. So there was a lot of change taking place in that, probably between 1990 and like 95, 96.
mm.
Lot of big
Yep.
changes in the industry.
Yeah. Now, forgive me for not remembering. Were you a radio major? Was that your?
Yes, yeah, I communications radio was my
So
major.
you took all the upper level
Yeah.
radio courses. Did you take TV courses?
I took TV courses too. So
Oh
that was a
wow.
fun time, but that was an exhausting time. Being up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go and paint at the TV studio, and then taking a full day of classes, and then having, Whiplash, I think, was on from like 1 to 3 in the morning.
I
I don't even know when I
I
slept.
feel like it was Monday nights like 10 to 11 or 9 to 11
No, it
for
was
a little
later than
while.
that. It was very late, because I can remember we were the last show that was on the air, and I was shutting it down, and I used to have campus security come and meet me outside the back door because it was so late and there was nobody left on campus, nobody at the
Yeah.
station, and I'd have them walk me to my dorm.
Wow. So you would you'd walk across the Unispan, they wouldn't even give you a ride?
I
To
was
one of
living
the
I didn't do the Unispan. I was living in suites. It was like the Netherlands or something like that.
Oh yeah, way out. Oh, the back end of the far end of campus then.
Yeah, so I don't remember them. They must have given me a ride. It's been 35 years. I
No,
don't remember.
I just discussed this with Jamie Morris, who was there later than we were, and
Uh,
she said, now like I can't imagine letting someone walk around campus in the middle of the night. Like we were 18, 19 years old. We're like, oh, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and again that sort of sense of adventure and being 20 years old and impervious to harm. I guess we just did things, but it's not ideal. And I guess that yeah, that makes sense. I'd forgotten that you had done TV stuff, and that was such um, a huge amount of time for
Yeah.
those you had to do the crew hours, right? And
Yep.
you know,
Yep. Hanging
recording
lights
things
and
and
painting sets and, out there with the hammer, maybe building things. It was fun. I mean, it was good times, but that combined with our responsibilities at the radio station it was insane.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know we've thrown around a bunch of names already, but who else do you remember being around at that time when we were spending all of our time at the station?
I mean, all of my best friends at that point were working at the station. So, Jen Murphy, uh, Todd Packer, Will Shelley, obviously Kathy
Hmm.
Wurzberger that we mentioned, Keith Hannon, Christy, who else was there? Dave Mock was there at that point.
Yeah,
And I remember when we first came in, like I can remember when we were freshmen, um, there were a lot of older people there that I think were our role models. I
yeah,
remember Eileen DeCalis and Renee and Karen Jean. I think we really looked up to them. But those are the people that I remember from when we were there.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. When you think about, or when you get a chance to talk about the radio station, is there a story that you always tell?
I the one that always sticks with me, Kathy and I. So let me preface this by saying that in order to have a show, in order to do Whiplash or Airwave or anything like that, you had to do a certain number of other shows. You had to do classical. You would have to do a jazz show. Um, and I can remember that Kathy and I had to do a jazz show, and we had gone to White Castle and gotten hamburgers, and we got food poisoning. And the two of us, and we couldn't leave. This is our time. We're here on the air, and both of us were dying, just taking turns being sick and spinning records and just talking as little as possible. And to this day, it's like a clockwork orange. Like jazz music just has such a visceral reaction in me from having to sit there and listen to that music when we were so sick. But I mean, that's part of radio. You're on the air, regardless of what happens. If you've got the flu, it doesn't make a difference. You got to do your shift.
Wow, I did not know that. I
Oh, it was
don't remember
terrible.
that at all. But that's the nightmare. That's the
It was a
nightmare
nightmare.
when
It was
you know
horrible. And I mean, we were stuck for what, a couple hours. I don't remember how long the shift was, but
they were usually 3 hours.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
because
neither of us
there was
could
a two to
leave.
five shift and 5 to 8. Oh my gosh. Well, at
It
least you
was
were
terrible.
together. At least you had
That's
someone
true.
to, take
Take
turns with
turns.
and run the board by. Oh my goodness, that's a
And I can
nightmare.
remember both of us just laying there with our heads on the table, just like, oh my God, we're going to die. How much is left? Oh, 2 hours and 47 minutes left. We're like, oh, great.
Oh man. Oh, that's rough. Well, let's never talk about that again because that's
Oh,
upsetting. What is a story that you never get a chance to talk about from your time at WRHU?
so one thing that really I hadn't thought about in years and just came up recently in my mind. There was a guy that worked at the station, Jeff Foss, and he did like a hip hop show. And while we were there, and I don't even remember what year this was, but Jeff was trying to get his pilot's license. And so he had to have a certain amount of time in the air. And so I guess it was at night that he did this. He would go and just had a small plane and he would take off from a local airport and he would have to have a certain number of air hours. And he was able to take other people with him. And I can remember that we had a banquet or some kind of a station event, and it was kind of winding down. And Jeff was like, hey, I need to get some flight time in. Would you guys like to take a ride with me? This is another thing that my mother would have a heart attack if she knew I did this.
Right.
So we all piled into the car and went out to the local airstrip and hopped in this little four-seater plane, this little teeny tiny plane. And it was a different world back then because Jeff was able to take us out and down around Manhattan. And I can remember being in this tiny plane, just flying near all the big buildings and flying around the Statue of Liberty. And we were so close to all of these things in this little plane. You would never be able to do that now. But we had like the tour of a lifetime as a result of him needing to get his flight hours in. And that I had forgotten about that for years, and that just popped up in my mind the other day. What a special experience that was.
I'm so glad you remembered that because I think we were both in that playing that night, and
Yep.
we were trying to figure out who else was there. Maybe it was Mike Brahatka, maybe it was I'm not sure who, but you know what? Like you said, what an opportunity! Like what a random thing! Like let's go fly, and we knew Jeff, I guess, well enough. I mean, he was the
I
host of the
didn't
post
even know that we did.
progressive pop art. You know, you're probably right, and we just did it. Like what kind of maniacs were we?
I know.
That's
And am I the only one that's remembering how close that plane got to everything?
no, no. I remember it, and I was just talking to Jen about this. That I mean, you know, later on, I flew in the helicopter and I flew in traffic planes over Long Island, so I have a lot of real visceral memories. And now I know the flight rules and talking to air traffic controllers. Now I understand it a lot better. But at the time, we were just like we're in a movie.
Yeah.
It's you know a crystal clear night and all the lights are on and you know the lights on the BQE and on the
Yep.
LIE and we're on the West Side Highway and the George Washington Bridge and you're seeing all these things and we're a bunch of 19-year-olds going wow, can we do this again? Like it was just
And here we
so
are, like we're dressed to the nines because we were at some kind of a party. So we're in all of our party
yeah.
clothes and, jackets with ties and all of that. But that was exciting. That was wild.
Yeah. Yeah, completely random. And I'm so glad you remember that because it's a core memory for me and I'm glad we got a chance to do that. And to that end, I think Jeff would show up every once in a while. He'd bring in a crate of records
Yep.
and then he'd be like, "I'm flying to Connecticut for this thing. Does anybody want to go for lunch?" And you know, three of us would like drive with him to Farmingdale and we'd you know, go to Connecticut and eat a hamburger at the airport and fly back. It was just the most random things, but it was a pretty good scam on his part because we would pay for the fuel
Right.
and for the you know he would say whatever it was for the plane rental and the fuel and we would happily fork over the money and he was getting his flight hours. So what a good scam, but what a good time.
Yeah.
What a good time. Wow. Um is there a song, is there an event, is there a thing that kind of defines your time at the station?
So for me, I can remember as music director, music changed from
Mm,
hair metal and kind of 80s pop, and things were starting to get grungy, and music was the whole landscape of music was changing probably right around that time, 91, 92. And I
mm-hmm,
can remember getting in Stone Temple Pilots, the core. I don't remember if it was a CD or
mm-hmm.
um, a record, but the core album.
I think it was a CD. Yeah.
I can remember, putting it on and, it starts off, I am smelling like a rose. And I can remember hitting pause and like just realizing that I have not ever heard anything like this before. Like that really, that particular song from that particular album made me realize that things are changing. To me, that kind of kicked off the whole grunge era. I can remember getting in Nevermind, like you mentioned Nevermind earlier. I can
Uh-huh.
remember I popped Nevermind into the CD player and stopped it and came and got everybody and was like, "You guys have to come and hear this." Like, Smells Like Teen Spirit blew our minds at the time,
Yeah.
um, just because it was just so different from what we had been hearing, and there was an obvious change taking place. So I think the whole grunge scene really kind of defines my time there.
Yeah, yeah, same. Because I feel like commercial radio really changed as well in response to the massive popularity. Because that Christmas of '91, you know, the parents bought Michael Jackson's record for their kids for Christmas, and they all returned it to Sam Goody and got Nevermind, and
Right.
everything
Right.
changed after that. It all changed. But when you mentioned the Stone Temple Pilots thing, I got chills because I feel like I remember hearing you playing that from the main office and you turned it up and you stopped it, turned it up and then started it again and we started wandering in like what's happening? What is this? We were just so intrigued. It was such a cool thing. So
And I mean, I consider that to be the best beginning of an album almost of all time. Like they picked the perfect song to kick off that album. It was just so attention grabbing. But yeah, I can remember that too. That I played it and I had to stop it and like collect myself for a minute. Like, what is this?
So obviously that is a ton of fun, and doing the metal show and doing all this is a lot of fun. But you mentioned all the other responsibilities and your major and the TV stuff. And was there ever a moment where you're like, nah, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just not going to think about the radio station at all?
Probably toward the end of my senior year, I had started an internship with WBAB, which was a professional station. And that really started to take up a lot of my time. And I think I maybe stepped back a little bit more from the college station and got a little bit more involved at WBAB. And I did actually end up getting hired by them after graduation. So
Hmm.
it turned out well, but I did, I was making new friends. I kind of did step back from the people that I hung out with a lot. But, at that point in time, we were thinking about, all right, I'm graduating in 4 or 5 months. Like, where is this going? What am I going to do with my life? And that was kind of my opportunity there to take the next step into professional radio. So, I didn't get out of radio, but I definitely feel like I pulled back from WRHU.
Yeah, I was doing my internship at WNEW, and I had a similar experience where I was like, this is I really want to pursue this. And we had put so much of our heart and souls into that station for a couple of years. And this
Yeah.
isn't on our scripted questions, but we discussed this before. And because we were there for the same 4 years, I've talked to Al about this a little bit, and Christy at other times, that when we were going into our summer between freshman and sophomore years. No, it would have been sorry, sophomore into junior years. That's when Jeff Krause took ill. So
Uh-huh.
he had done the banquet and made the announcement of all the positions, and he had gone for surgery, and we didn't really know much about it. We were just sort of doing our thing, and I wasn't sure if you were around that summer or if you had gone home.
I
uh,
had gone home. Yeah, I wasn't there that summer.
so when you came back in the fall, like what did you hear? What did you notice? But because Jeff was out, almost indefinitely. He'd show up once in a while. But what do you remember about that
I remember
time?
Sue Zizza took over a lot of the day to day operations at the station. She really stepped up when we needed her.
Sure.
But I do think I was not there for a lot of what was going on with Jeff, and I don't, and at the time I was so young, I don't know how much awareness I had of what it all meant.
Yeah.
Uh, to tell you the truth, but I do remember that Sue did step up and kind of took over and was helping us at that time.
Yeah. And Steve Spencer came in, and he was
Hmm.
a
Yep.
huge help and mentor. But I feel like, and this is something that I think about often, is that, like you said, being that age, 19, 20 years old, and having all our other, you know, self-important priorities, we were like, well, how's Jeff? Oh, he's fine. He'll be back in a couple of weeks. And we
Yeah.
go, okay, and just
Yeah.
sort of carry about our business. But I remember a lot of that burden, like you said, being on Sue, and a lot of it being on us to make sure that things were getting done. And it's not that other, program directors or music directors or station managers wouldn't have done it. I'm sure they would have done a phenomenal job. But we were kind of under the gun to keep that station going in his absence, because Sue's not only running the station and teaching classes, but she's caring for Jeff as well. So I just remember us really core group of about 15 of us, or maybe 20
Uh-huh.
of us, just spending all our time and energy running that place. And then when Jeff did pass, which would have been, I think, in 93,
That
in that
sounds right.
spring, that was again, it was sort of a big thing, that here's this man who's been running the station for 30 years. Now everything's different. And I'm wondering what you remember about that.
I am wondering if our group was so close and has really remained so close as a result of that. Like the way that we did have to band together
Yeah.
because, we didn't have anybody there holding everything. It was up to us to hold things together.
Yeah.
And maybe that is why we all bonded like we did. I mean, that was our lives for years. You know, that was the all of our friends. I hung out with the people that worked at the station. We did shows. When we weren't doing shows, we were, hanging out with each other in the office. If we went out and did something, we were all together. And maybe it was because we were forced together and forced to, keep things going like that. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like there was a real period of uncertainty for us once Jeff had passed and they put out the notice, for hiring a new general manager. And there were a lot of us who wanted Sue to have the job, and some of us wanted Steve to have the job. And other people said, well, let's bring in someone from the outside. And I feel like we didn't hear a lot from the university about that process, and we weren't asked a lot, but we certainly
No.
were, invested.
Yeah, I remember they brought in Bruce, right?
Right.
And I remember not being super happy about that at the time. He came in and we maybe had been helping things coast along for a while, and I think he wanted to make changes that I think at the time I was a little resistant to.
Yeah.
I don't
Well, I
know if
don't I don't think we didn't have any say in the interviews. We didn't get any
yeah,
feedback, and it was announced, and we didn't know who this guy was. And
right,
I mean, the man lasted there for 29 years, so he was obviously
right,
invested, but we didn't know, and he had big plans, and we're like,
right,
"Well, we've been running this place. Who are you?"
right. Who's this guy?
So yeah, he definitely had a vision for what he wanted to impose, but and bring to the station, and it's worked out for the station overall long term, but it was definitely a weird time, and I don't know. I think we just worked ourselves as hard as we could, and hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we had to. What are you going to do? I mean, the show must go on, and somebody
Yeah,
had to run the show. So
yeah,
yeah,
big responsibility for a bunch of knucklehead kids, but somehow we pulled it off.
yeah.
Um, so that aside, all these shows, the interviews, the bands, all the things, is there a biggest accomplishment from your time at WRHU?
Um, I feel like it definitely was the stepping stone for me. What I did at WRHU made me confident enough to go and get that internship at WBAB and to push them to hire me and to get that first job. But I think I was pretty cocky, having started Whiplash and people were listening to it, and so when I went to a professional radio station, I had a cockiness to me. I think as a result of my time on the air. Um, happy. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the opportunities that it gave me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do you have a funny story or a memory that always makes you laugh about the time at the station?
The thing that always makes me laugh was our ridiculous habit of switching our L's and our R's. Like we still do it, Brian.
Yeah.
Um, but just that it was. I don't even remember who started this, but it became a habit at the station that we would all be hanging out
Yeah, there's many people who claim to have started it. I think it was Prohatka and Al, but we'll leave that up to the face to decide. But yeah, we all picked up on it, and we all did it, and
for
we're a bunch
years.
of
We did it
weirdos.
for years.
Yeah.
The other thing, do you remember that we used to, if somebody would say something out of context, it would get written on a piece of paper with the person who said
Yes.
it and the date, and it would get stuck up on the wall. And I wish I had pictures of some of the stuff that was like before that's what she said, but it was the same concept.
Yes. Yes. I think I have some of them. I'll have to
Do you
dig some out
really?
and send them to you. Yeah.
Oh, I would
Yeah.
love to see those. But that was as soon as something would come out of your mouth, you'd be like, "Oh, that's going up on the wall," and it
Yeah.
would stay up for years.
Yeah. Did you spend much time in the new building, or that was really after we graduated, right?
That was after we graduated. I don't even really remember the new building that much. Yeah, we were in the basement the whole
Yeah.
time I can
Yeah, and
remember.
we'd started making preparations to move things over, but that's another story. So let's just say
Um,
you're in Queens for a Mets game or something, and someone from
uh,
WRHU says, "Hey, can you come out to Hempstead and do a show?" Are you doing
Yeah, I love to talk. I
it?
absolutely would do it.
um,
You want to put me on the air and we'll just talk about whatever and play music for a while? Yeah, that'd be fun. I would do it.
well, I guess my follow up question, and I think I know the answer, but what kind of show would you do? Would you do Whiplash? What would you do?
It would be a lot of fun to do Whiplash again, both like classic Whiplash and maybe the way it's evolved now. I mean, music is so much different than it used to be that I think that would be fun to just dig through stacks of new music. Part of it was that a lot of what we were getting in, nobody had ever heard.
Yeah,
When I got that Stone Temple Pilots CD, like we were some of the first people to hear that because they had just released the album and it went to college radio. So I'm sure that on some level that's still happening, that if you're working in the radio station, you're hearing stuff that is going to be the next big thing. And I think that would be really exciting to get to dig around and see what they've got and hear what's new.
yeah. I think almost I don't know. I think a lot of stuff comes in now digitally and in file form. There's not the physical
Mhm.
media anymore, which kind of disappoints me. I really enjoyed that. Like you were talking about the records and holding those things and labeling the CDs. I miss that tactile thing, but in any case, yeah, I think that's really the discovering ground for a lot of things is college radio still to
And
this day.
I think too, being able to flip through records and CDs, you used to be able to see the art. And I think there were things that I played just because it had a really cool cover, or, oh, I'm going to play this record because it's on pink and yellow vinyl. And,
Yeah.
that was definitely, I think, influenced what I listened to and what I played was what it looked like. And I think that maybe they're missing out on that a little bit now.
That reminds me of there was a band called School of Fish.
Oh, that's the one, wasn't it? Pink and yellow or something?
It played backwards. It played inside out. It was
Yeah.
3 Strange Days, and you started it in the middle, in the center, and
Hmm.
it would play backwards out, and it was a great song anyway. I still love that song, but
I do
I think it
too.
got played a lot more often just because it was a novelty. It's like, oh, cool, watch this. We're gonna play this song, and then someone else would play it for someone else, and what a smart gimmick. What a fun thing to do. And then I guess that was also the era
It
when
worked.
they started having secret hidden tracks on CDs. That there was there'd be 12
Uh-huh.
tracks listed, and there'd be secret like 17th track and things like that. There were all kinds of little fun
After 45 minutes of silence, all of a sudden a song plays.
that scare the crap out of you. Um, yeah. Oh, cool. That's fun stuff. What do you miss most about working at the station?
I just miss the camaraderie. Like I made lifelong friends there, and that was so cool to go to a class and then you'd come back and all of your friends are hanging out down there and you're listening to new music and then you get to go on the air and talk about it and have fun. Like I definitely miss the fellowship
Yeah.
of all of it. It was something you don't have every day.
Yeah, and I think a radio station brings together a lot of different kinds of people that you wouldn't necessarily meet in class or pay attention to in class
True.
because you're just doing that thing. But hey, I'm listening to this, or what's that, or what are you reading, or I think that brought a lot of us together in really interesting ways.
No, I definitely think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you could time travel and go back and meet yourself at, I don't know, 18 years old or 20 years old, what piece of advice would you give your younger version?
Honestly, pick a different major. I spent a lot of money for that communications degree that I should have just majored in business and minored in communications. Like I don't know if that was, especially with as much as the industry changed 30 seconds after I graduated, if I had known that's what was going to happen, I probably would have picked a different major and you know focused less on the communications classes, the radio classes that were obsolete immediately. But who knew? Going into it, we had no idea that that was going to happen.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you were saying before about doing Whiplash and music director about making relationships with reps and things like that. That was something I was not aware of going into. I wasn't a radio major. It wasn't something that occurred to me until I started producing Airwave, and I was like, oh, this is a whole thing. Like you have to learn the labels and the distributors and the reps and things like that. Did you know much of that coming
Yeah,
in,
I
or
going in, I don't know going in that I did, but I quickly learned that, like, you go into that office and the phone is ringing. People are calling. They want to talk to you about the new stuff that they've got coming out. And the interesting thing was, as a result of that, I ended up probably in like my junior year, I interned at Arista Records, which was fun. And I got to see
Right.
that end of it all. Um, it definitely was educational, but I don't think going in that I quite realized that that's how it worked. But that definitely, even in, at professional stations, you are in contact with those people all the time. That's just
Yeah.
that's how it works.
I've talked to a lot of more recent graduates about their internships and their opportunities in college. And now, there's a whole network that was built by Bruce Avery and Ed Ingles and John Mullen and now Kathleen Shortis, and they have all these contacts everywhere and the internet and the School of Communications, all that stuff. How did you get an internship at Arista Records?
Um,
In
I think so. I think I got the internship at Arista. Sharon Jaffe was working there, and she had
Right,
graduated a couple of years before us. So I kind of knew Sharon, and I think I was probably talking to her a lot as music director, and she needed an intern. And so I think I probably got that one through her. But I think that I got my internship at WBAB upstairs, like near the guidance counselors or whatever they called them back in the day. There was a hallway with bulletin boards with papers on them of different places that were looking for interns. And I think I got my WBAB internship by, there's a sign with the little pieces of paper with a phone number coming
right.
off the bottom. And I think I ripped off one of those pieces of paper and called WBAB. And the next thing you know, I'm interning there. It was not, this was not a digital, world at that
No,
point in time.
no. That's oh wow, that's cool. So would that have been upstairs a memorial? There was like the bursar's office or something like where you'd register for
Possible.
classes. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm trying to
possible. I
picture
think
where
it
that
was
was.
it was on an upper floor somewhere, and I remember, they were saying, "Oh, you gotta start thinking about an internship. You gotta, get your foot in the door," and they said, "Go upstairs." And there were just all these different opportunities, and I was like, "Oh, WBAB's a radio station. That's nearby. That sounds like fun." And so, I but it was a sign on the wall that got my foot in the door there.
I bet it was upstairs at Dempster in the TV
It
building.
could have been.
Yeah.
It could have been.
Now, did you have a car?
I did not. No.
How'd you get to BAB?
Um, I think I think I got a car at that point. Like I did
Okay.
not have a car up until that point, and I think that was when I realized that all right, I've taken the bus, I've, relied on friends, and I do think like my parents ended up buying me some kind of a piece of junk car that probably broke down every third day just so that I could get back and forth to there. So yeah, I
Wow.
got a car because of that internship now that you're mentioning it.
Yeah, there you go. Because it just occurred to me. I was like, you didn't drive while we were in college, but that and yeah. So you would have been going into the city junior year for Arista. Were you going in like 1 or 2 days a week?
Yeah, it was at least once a week, and I would my boyfriend would drive me to the train station because I didn't have a car. We'd get up in the morning,
Hmm.
he'd drive me to the train station, I would catch the train in, get the subway, I'd walk to Arista, and then, at the end of the day, do it in reverse, and he'd pick me up and take me home.
Wow. Wow. Good times.
Yep.
Good times. Just to go back to that advice about choosing a different major, would 18-year-old Denise have listened to you?
Of course not, no. I'm sure somebody
Thank
probably
you.
told me not to major in, communications radio, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do what I want."
Yeah, yeah, we're a little headstrong back then. You
Yeah, I
mentioned
still
this a
am.
little bit earlier. Yeah, well, that's why we're still friends, I think.
This is true.
Um, you mentioned a little bit about that job at BAB and some other things. Um, what other skills or lessons or what did you take from Hofstra Radio that's followed you in your career and your grown up life?
Just that confidence and cockiness. Like as confident and cocky as I was going into it, I really think that having people at 19 pay attention to you and you're on the air and they're calling in, and I mean that radio station, they could hear us in Manhattan. So
Yeah,
knowing that we had this potential humongous audience and still getting in there and running our mouths and doing what we did, I think has given me confidence in my adult life, and I can talk to anybody about anything for any amount of time. I'm not afraid to talk to people, and I think it's a direct result of that. You know,
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I mean that's that real life experience and doing things and having success. That's great. That's carried with you. That's awesome. Anyway, this has been so much fun. I love when we get to see each other in person a couple times a year, and I love talking and catching up on these stories. Thank you so much for doing this, Denyse.
you're very welcome. It was great to talk to you.